Chapter 9. Rory, I'm afraid of my own weakness when it comes to Jack. Bella sat across from her friend in the corner of Betty's cafe and sipped her coffee. Bella had texted Rory yesterday, desperately needing the listening ear of a friend. It had been 4 days since they'd flown back from Europe, and Jack had been working every day late into the evening on designs for clients. He'd also been busy organizing the workers he'd hired to work the silver mine he'd just inherited from his great-grandfather. With the exception of those few minutes Jack took each day to go over design ideas with Bella for the Rose Adventure Park, she hadn't seen him much. After a week of getting closer, they had now retreated from each other. "What do you mean, Bella?" Rory took a small bite of her muffin, using her napkin to delicately wipe away crumbs from her mouth. "Well, the week we had together in Europe went far better than I expected." Bella let out a heavy sigh. "And now I find that I'm attracted to Jack a lot more than I should be." Bella set her coffee mug down on the table, her fingers toying absently with the spoon beside her plate. It sounds like you've been thoroughly wooed and kissed by your husband. That's truly horrible." Rory touched the back of her hand to her forehead in a dramatic woe-is-me sigh. Fake husband. To Bella's mind, those two words made all the difference. Rory shook her head slightly and relaxed, leaning back in her chair. "Okay, tell me what happened. What is it exactly about your relationship with Jack that's got you so worried?" "Well, he treated me like a princess during our trip. He spent time with me, bought me clothes. He even took me to a rare bookstore where he bought me a first edition of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice." Bella looked out the window, heat rising in her neck and cheeks as more memories surfaced. "Then one night I had another one of my nightmares. Jack held me and comforted me until I was calm enough to fall back asleep. Now that he's had a deeper glimpse into my heart, we've become much closer. To be honest, it terrified me so much I started to back away from him." Bella's lips formed into a thin line, her brows puckered in worry. Rory leaned forward, her elbows on the table, her gaze unflinching. "Bella, listen to me. I know you're scared. Heaven knows I would be too if I were in your shoes. But I really think you need to give Jack a chance. You said he's been good to you. Why not see where this relationship goes?" "Because that's not how this relationship is supposed to go, Rory. Jack and I agreed on a fake marriage, not a real one." Bella's voice started to break and stress lines appeared around her eyes. "We're supposed to stay married as friends for 1 year and then get a quiet divorce. This fake marriage is supposed to be effortless and well-controlled. There's supposed to be no hurt feelings in the end." Rory laughed and shook her head. "You make this sound like a science experiment, Bella. Since when is any relationship effortless and well-controlled?" Bella shrugged, realizing the truth of Rory's words. "Okay, you're right. Relationships are complicated. But that's the part that worries me. How will I be able to put a stop to this attraction to Jack and get through the next 11 months without making a fool of myself?" "Do you need to put a stop to it, Bella? You said yourself that Jack treated you like a princess during your honeymoon. Maybe you're not the only one who is struggling with their feelings. What if Jack is really falling for you?" Rory studied her, a satisfied smile turning her lips upward as her hands rested under her chin. Bella opened her mouth and shut it a few times before speaking, remembering their week together. "No, I really don't think Jack is falling for me." Bella remembered his passionate kisses, but she also remembered how he'd pulled away from her on their last day together. By the time they'd flown home, Jack had already put a whole lot of distance between them. "Why would you say that, Bella? Sounds like Jack has been passionately wooing you." Bella breathed out a heavy sigh. "I'm not sure. Sometimes it seems like he's wooing me, but then the next day he puts giant walls between us. He's been giving me too many mixed signals." Rory leaned closer to Bella, her eyes pinning her to the spot in a laser-like focus. "Is it possible the two of you have given each other mixed signals? It seems to me you two just need to stop avoiding each other and see where your relationship goes." "Maybe. But Jack's so busy." "Bella, you live in the same house. You're designing a project together. Talk to Jack. Rory leaned closer, her eyes focused on Bella's like a laser beam. You're right. I need to stop letting fear hold me back. Bella nodded almost to herself. I'll talk to him. All too soon, it was time for them to leave. Rory left the coffee shop with her 3 aunts, and Bella went home to work on the finishing touches of the latest design for the adventure park. Driving up the hill, she wondered if Jack would be home, or if he was working late at his office down the hill. As she drove her vehicle through the gates, she saw Jack's truck parked in front of the garage. Bella parked her car beside his truck. Carrying the heavy bags, she walked into the house. I'll carry those to your office, Mrs. Stevenson. Ben was waiting at the door when she arrived. Thank you, Ben. He walked down the hall to her office. Bella was about to follow when she heard her dad's voice coming in the direction of the kitchen. She hung up her coat and walked toward the kitchen, smiling as she heard Chipper talking with her father. So, Chipper, do you think your grandmother will let me snatch one of her cookies? Her dad's voice could be heard clearly, above the whirring of the mixer in the background. Bella stepped into the kitchen, greeted by the heavenly scent of chocolate chip cookies. Mrs. Potter turned around to stick the next pan of cookies into the oven. She won't mind. Grandma lets me have a snack after I've done all my chores for the day. Did you finish your chores, Mr. Campbell? Chipper, at 10 years old, had a personality that suited his name. He was always found helping Mrs. Potter carry this and that every day after school. Well, lately I haven't had that many chores, so I guess I'm finished my chores for the day, Chipper. Her dad winked at him. In that case, here you go. Chipper handed a cookie into her dad's eager hand. Hello, Dad. Bella was greeted by her dad's wide smile, which always made her feel so loved. She walked over to him and gave him a big hug, whispering in his ear, What does your nurse say about eating cookies? Aye, beauty. It's happy I am to see you. Her dad turned at the sound of her voice and put his arm around her, sighing. I know I'm not to have too many sweets, but maybe one will be okay. Bella kissed his cheek. All right. Dunlin Campbell, I saw that. Nurse Marmee walked into the kitchen, put her hands on her hips. The corners of her mouth turned up as she silently stared at her patient and shook her head. Aye, it's only one cookie, lassie. Surely you'll not deny me this wee bit of pleasure. Dunlin winked at his nurse and grinned. Oh, I suppose just this once wouldn't hurt. Glancing at her dad's nurse, Bella noticed a telltale blush creeping up her neck and onto her cheeks. Nurse Marmee's normal composure slipped a little with her dad's charm. It made her wonder if there was more going on between them than she realized. It had always been just Bella and her dad. As she studied the two of them, it suddenly dawned on her that maybe now that her father saw his only daughter married, maybe he was open to the idea of marrying again. It was possible that soon she would need to share his affections. Insecurity tugged at her heart with the new changes going on around her. Since you're in good hands, Dad, I'll be going. I need to get back to work. Bella started to turn, but the housekeeper stopped her in her tracks. Bella, before you leave, have a cookie. Mrs. Potter smiled at her, pushing a plate of fresh cookies her way. You need to put some fat on those bones. Bella laughed at her grandmotherly concern. Mrs. Potter, I couldn't possibly. I'm still too full from lunch. Maybe I'll stop by later and grab a cookie then, if that's okay with you. Most likely later on you'll be busy talking to our Jack. He was here not 30 minutes ago asking where you were. Mrs. Potter leaned over and whispered, If you ask me, Bella, he seemed a little hot under the collar that you weren't here. Okay, I'll check to see if Jack's in his office. Bella's voice came out wobbly and unsure. She tossed a quick smile, kissed her dad's cheek, and hurried out of the kitchen. Bella walked down the hallway just past the library and knocked softly on Jack's office door. There was no answer, so she went to her own office across the hall, thinking she would get started on the new designs before Jack came back. She had just opened the design software to the project when Jack burst into the room. So here you are, Bella. He closed the door and walked over to her desk, sounding out of breath. I've been looking all over for you. Where have you been? Jack walked around the desk and leaned a hip against the solid oak wood. His arms were folded across his chest as he waited for an answer. His expression was cool and detached as he stared at her. Bella's shoulders tensed, bracing herself. She really didn't want to fight with him, but he was making it really difficult for her not to be on the defensive. Maybe he'd calm down if she explained. Jack, I went to Betty's cafe to eat lunch with Rory. I thought you'd be gone all day, so I didn't leave a note. I didn't mean to worry you. Jack's shoulders relaxed a little, and he rubbed his chin. Bella's forehead furrowed, and she wondered what was going on with Jack. Why would he feel so worried about her leaving? He sat on the edge of her desk, toying with her colored pens, before looking her way again. As much as his question and cool manner frustrated her, she couldn't help but sense there was a real fear behind his worry. Bella looked up at her husband. The frantic look in his eyes had been replaced by mild concern. He rubbed his forehead and released a long sigh. Please let me know next time you leave to go somewhere. I will, Jack, I promise. Bella placed her hands on top of his, wondering where all this worry had come from. Jack put both hands over hers, his thumb lightly caressing the skin on the back of her hand. His tender touch brought warm tingles to her skin that shot up her arm like thousands of tiny prickles of heat. His eyes darkened and burned with intensity as he stared at her. Unexpectedly, Jack leaned down slowly, as if to kiss her. Bella panicked. She loved Jack's kisses, but they needed to remember their relationship was a marriage contract. Theirs was a relationship based on convenience, not on true love. Bella turned her head to the side to look at her computer in an effort to distract him. Jack, would you take a look at the latest design I created for the Rose Adventure Park? His hazel eyes narrowed slightly, and he raised one eyebrow, making her aware that he knew she was trying to divert his attention away from kissing her. Jack stepped close to her, his cheek nearly brushing hers, as he leaned down to study the design on her computer screen. This design is a rough sketch of the ideas I've had rolling around in my head for the Princess Castle. Bella pointed to the 4 turrets that graced each side of the castle walls. The interior had a wide stone staircase leading to an upstairs balcony that overlooked the entrance. There were more rooms as you climbed the staircase to the 3rd floor, where there was a large room for each of the 4 corners. Bella clicked her mouse to open up a larger version of the design, and she explained to Jack. When we visited the theme park in Paris, I was inspired by the design, and it gave me some new ideas. She pointed to the layout she had on the computer screen and asked, So, what do you think? Bella turned to look over at Jack. The corners of his mouth turned up into a wide grin. This is a really great design, Bella. I can tell you've given the details a lot of thought. I'm convinced kids and adults alike will be captivated. A warmth curled in her belly at his words of praise. Thanks, Jack. There are so many more ideas I have for this theme park. She spoke animatedly. I had an idea for the Founders' Day celebration. I would like to put together a 3D model of the designs we have for the Rose Adventure Park so the folks of Paradise Lake could get a really good idea of the fun theme park we are creating here. And hopefully, when they see the design, they will get excited about it. I think it would be great to show folks a model of the Rose Adventure Park design at the Founders' Day celebration. But there's just one drawback. Jack ran one finger down the calendar that hung on her wall. What's that? The Founders' Day celebration is in less than 2 weeks. Do you think that will be enough time to put a 3D model together? Bella nodded. I do. I have a friend from college who specializes in visualization products. I think she'll be able to get this done quickly. All right then, let's do it. Jack stood up, big smile on his face. Now we just need more of the townsfolk in Paradise Lake to get excited about this theme park, because maybe that will sway the town council in our favor. Maybe. Jack rubbed his chin thoughtfully before his gaze looked back at her. You've got some great ideas, Bella. Thank you, Jack. Bella relished his words of praise. She knew it was rare for Jack to give compliments, so words of appreciation were all the more meaningful coming from him. Jack nodded and walked to the door before he turned in her direction. "Don't forget, my grandparents, Mum, and the rest of the family will be here tomorrow for our monthly get-together." "I look forward to it, Jack." Bella gave him a big smile as he left her office. Bella rested her head against the back of her chair and sighed. As much as she adored Jack's family, she had to admit she was a little on edge about seeing them. She was grateful Al would be there, so at least she had someone in the family that understood her. Yet, Bella worried that her and Jack wouldn't be able to convince the rest of the Stevenson family they were in love. "What a lovely place to have a picnic." Catherine Stevenson walked beside Bella toward the sandy beach in front of Jack's lake. "It is beautiful, isn't it?" Bella carried one of the picnic baskets and set it on top of the table that Ben and Chipper had set up. "Bella, you've outdone yourself. This is perfect." Eliza Stevenson walked on Bella's other side, her gaze sweeping over the grassy knoll that overlooked the sandy beach and lake. Clasping Bella's hand, Eliza leaned over to whisper in her ear, "I'm so happy Jack has you for his wife. I see a change in my son. He's more content and happy now. You're just what he needs." Heat crept up into Bella's neck and spread to her cheeks. "Thanks, Mum." It felt weird to call Eliza Stevenson Mum. Bella never had the privilege of having a mum in her life, since her own mother died when she was born. A warmth surrounded her heart at being close to Jack's mum, a kind and generous lady who had been through so much. Eliza's husband had died when her 5 sons were just starting their teen years, and she had raised them on her own. Bella had so much respect for Jack's mum, and her ability to go on through those tough times with grace and strength. She hoped that sometime in the not-too-distant future, Eliza would share more of her story. Jack's mom saw her as a wife who was in love with her son. Her mother-in-law saw her as the woman who made her son happy. Bella only saw herself as the token wife for this year only, until Jack found a real wife he actually loved and wanted to marry. The fact was, both her and Jack needed his family and her dad to believe they were in love. They didn't want to cause any hurt to Jack's grandparents, his mom, or her dad. They loved and respected them too much to let a fake marriage be the cause of pain. Bella caught a glimpse of her dad walking beside Nurse Marmee, leaning on her for support. He looked over at her, a happy grin on his face. At least her dad was honest about his growing love for Marmee. She, on the other hand, felt like a fraud. Bella glanced over to see the source of her irritation, her fake husband, walking ahead of them beside his granddad. They seemed like they were in a deep conversation. Jack glanced over at her, a rogue smile hovering over his lips. Her husband wore a white t-shirt and jean shorts that emphasized his long tanned legs and muscular arms. Jack was so good-looking and charming that it was difficult to resist his appeal. She had to continually remind herself that Jack was only pretending to love her. Sometimes the way her husband's hazel eyes zeroed in on hers, or the tender touch of his hand, caused her awareness of him to intensify to the point where Bella was convinced she was falling in love. But Bella didn't want to let her thoughts go down that rabbit hole. She couldn't let herself be trapped. She couldn't let herself lose control. She couldn't let herself fall in love. However, neither could she dwell on the fact that Jack had married her to get his great-grandfather's inheritance. In some ways, Bella felt like she didn't have any other choice. It was either marry Jack, or they would have drowned in debt from her dad's medical bills, and they would have lost the only home she'd ever known. She had done what she needed to do. Now she needed to make the best of it. Bella led the Stevenson family to the plushly cushioned wicker furniture that they'd placed on the grass under the shade of the poplar trees. A large coffee table rested between the wicker sofas, a place to rest their drinks. Bella had scoured the area before she created this pillowy soft oasis so near the sandy beach of the lake. "Bella, I think I might just stay here forever. This is beautiful." Al laughed as she sat down and put her feet up. "Al, as much as I would like to grant your wish, I'm afraid we'd still need to get you to the hospital within the month." Adam reached a gentle hand to massage his wife's baby belly. "I suppose so, and here I was hoping to make this place my new refuge away from the world," Al giggled. You can come here as often as you like, Al. I love this place, too. Bella said softly as she looked out at the lake. Soon everyone was talking about the soon-to-be arrival of Al and Adam's baby. Have you found out if your baby is a boy or a girl? Bella relaxed against the cushioned sofa. Jack seated himself next to her, his arm around her shoulders. Bella shivered with a growing awareness of her husband's touch as his fingers drew gentle circles on her shoulders. We wanted to keep it a surprise, so we won't know until the baby is born. Al smiled over at her husband. Adam pulled his wife close to his side. We're excited to find out. Adam lifted Al's hand to his lips and kissed it. Bella saw the loving way Adam treated his wife and sighed. She looked around and saw Jack's granddad and grandmom sitting close beside each other, holding hands. These couples held a deep and lasting love for each other that Bella couldn't quite understand, but knew it was something she desperately wanted for herself. The buffet table for lunch is all set and ready to enjoy. Ben walked over to announce that it was time to eat. Mrs. Potter was already waiting for them, busy organizing all the food on the tables that were under the shade of the pop-up beach canopy. Chipper and Ben were by her side helping. Catherine walked next to Bella as they approached the buffet table. They carried their picnic-style food of light sandwiches, salads, and other finger food to the sitting area. Bella, come sit beside me for lunch. I'd like to get to know you better. Catherine patted the seat beside her. Looks like both our husbands decided to go off on their own anyway. Of course. Bella nodded at Catherine and sat down. She glanced over quickly to see Jack in what seemed to be a deep conversation with his granddad. So tell me, what's it like being married to my grandson so far? Catherine took a delicate sip of her iced tea, her eyes filled with curiosity as she looked at her new granddaughter. Bella set her plate of food on the coffee table and held a glass of lemon water in her hand as she thought about what to say. Well, Jack is like no other man I've ever known. The corners of her lips curled up as she thought about her husband. He can be pushy in order to get the details exactly as he wants, which I discovered when he bought clothes for me in Paris. Bella recalled that with many of the dresses she'd tried on, Jack had asked for something similar but in a different color or size. He had wanted to get clothes that were perfect for her. Bella continued, yet, at the same time, he can be surprisingly generous and thoughtful. He took me to a rare bookstore in Paris and bought me a first edition of the book Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I'd dreamed of owning a first edition of that novel since I was a teenager. Bella shook her head, bewildered and a little confused by her husband. Pushy to get what he wants, yet surprisingly generous. Yes, that sounds exactly like our Jack. Catherine smiled, and her gaze wandered over to where Jack stood talking to his granddad. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Bella grinned at that. So you're saying that Jack got his nature from his granddad? Well, partly from his Stevenson forebears, but also from what he's been through in the past. What do you mean? Bella was really curious to learn more about Jack so she could understand him better. Well, I'm not sure if you know about Jack's background, Bella, but all 5 of Eliza and Daniel's sons struggled to make ends meet after their father passed away suddenly. Jack was only 14 at the time. Catherine's eyes misted a little as she remembered. They made it through that time, and it bonded them closer as a family. All those boys ended up going to college, but they never forgot that their father died suddenly because of the stress it caused him when their dad's partner took all his money. Bella commented, So finding ways to help other people became their passion. That's right. But it was during college that Jack got a little wild for a time, and that's when he met Ellen. It seemed like they were married almost as soon as they met. But the most difficult time for Jack was after his wife left him. She was in a car accident that killed both his wife and unborn son. Jack was devastated. Catherine sighed deeply before she continued. It was all too much for Jack. So he built this massive home here on the hill and has basically been hiding here for the past 4 years. Jack's gone through so much heartache. Bella wiped a tear that had snuck its way down her cheek. Jack's grandmother smiled gently. That's true, my dear. All the pain has made him too afraid to love. He's been too afraid of trusting another woman and misreading her motives. He's afraid of being hurt, so he pushes people away before he can be hurt by them. Catherine leaned closer to Bella and whispered, That's why I'm so glad he has you by his side to show him how to trust again. I'm glad my grandson has you to show him how to love again. Something in her tone made Bella's heart ache for Jack. In the past few days she had been the one pushing Jack away. She'd been the one who had been terrified by the power of her own emotions. Maybe it was time for her to let down her walls, to open up her heart to the possibility of loving her husband. She squeezed Catherine's hand, sitting with her in silence for a long time, digesting her words. Perhaps it was time to let go of fear and embrace love.